Hey everyone, Adam here with the first and hopefully a new series where I go over a specific game and tell you exactly what it is. This won't be so much of a review, though I'll give my opinion throughout, but more of a what exactly is this game about? So you can decide if you want to play it yourself, watch content about it, skip it, etc. So without further ado, here's what is Against the Storm. Against the Storm is a roguelike or roguelite city building and colony management game. Unlike most games in the city builder genre though, you'll be building mini settlements, not just one. Each one different than the last thanks to the game's RNG roguelike mechanics, which continue to expand through meta progression. Another difference from most of these games is that due to game mechanics I'll talk about later, there's never an equilibrium to your settlements. You can't set up something in a perfect, preconceived way and just sit back and watch the town be at peace. There's always something to figure out or something to be done. Don't worry though, the game does let you pause as well as issue commands and such while you're paused. In addition, the game has a ton of different difficulty options, from the more relaxed kind of chill settler difficulty all the way up through various punishing prestige level difficulties. One of the things I really enjoy about the game is how deceptively complex it can be, especially at those higher difficulties. There's a ton of systems and strategies to learn if you want to. It's also nice that each settlement is sort of bite-sized, so to speak. A typical run for me takes 1 to 3 hours depending on difficulty and game speed. In Against the Storm, you play as the Viceroy to the Queen. The Queen is the enigmatic and temperamental ruler of this post-apocalyptic kingdom. Through her power and those that serve her, the kingdom is protected from a massive storm which pretty much destroys or resets everything outside of the smoldering city at the end of each cycle, and thus begins our game loop. You start each cycle by selecting an area for your first settlement. As you progress, the distance you can start from prior settlements will increase, as will the amount of settlements you'll be allowed to settle before the cycle ends. You can also always end a cycle early if you'd like to for any reason. Each tile you select has many things to keep in mind. Different biomes will contain different kinds of materials, partially based off that biome's tree type, but there are also other factors for each zone to consider as well. In addition to different materials, you'll also run into different effects or mutators depending on your selection, how close you are to certain random world objects, etc. These can be good effects or bad and will oftentimes greatly impact not only where you settle, but how you will build that settlement to survive. Once you've chosen where to settle, you are met with an Embarkation menu. This is another place in the game which continues to massively expand through meta progression, which I'll talk more about later. In this menu, you can choose the group of settlers you want to begin the next settlement with, as well as spend some points on extra materials you start with. You can't save or bank these points either, so if you do play, make sure you just spend all of them. Each of the game's races are unique and have different bonuses and needs. As you learn more about the game as well as unlock more things, this will become a more and more important choice in how you intend to beat each level. Each settlement can have a maximum of 3 playable races right now, though oftentimes you'll start with just 1 or 2. I'll talk more about the different races later. Once you've embarked, you will start on a randomly generated map with your colonists, a hearth, and a warehouse. You'll need to keep your hearth burning throughout the game to keep your citizens' mood up. Citizens with low mood can abandon the settlement, making things more difficult or even causing you to lose if everyone's gone. Each settlement will start surrounded by trees. You'll of course need to begin cutting into these, but doing so is a major component in increasing the hostility of the forest, which, again, I'll go over later. Outside of your initial clearing, you're going to see glades, ranging from small, seemingly innocent ones, to larger, dangerous, or forbidden glades. Although there's no combat in this game, the glades will contain events, which you must solve, often using some sort of material and plus some laborers, or else you're going to incur penalties. Often these penalties are negative, persistent debuffs to that settlement, but can even be things such as colonist deaths. Cutting into glades also permanently increases the forest's hostility, but again, I'll talk more on hostility later. Despite the danger of the glades, you're going to need to cut into them to find more resources and to beat the level. Thus comes one of the balancing and strategic portions of the game that I enjoy. This is also one of the main components of the different difficulties. The higher the difficulty, the more hostility you get from glades and the harder the events can become. I've talked a little about winning and losing, so let's go over what that entails now. Remember when I said the Queen is temperamental? Well, your entire job is to max out a settlement's reputation or standing before the Queen's impatience becomes too high. If you max out the impatient meter, this red meter down at the bottom right of the screen, you lose the level and the settlement. You can also lose by running out of citizens. There are several ways to gain this favor or reputation though and lower the Queen's impatience. The first will come in orders. On a timer, the Queen will send you sets of orders in which you can choose what you want to try to complete. This is another RNG portion of the game which makes it so every settlement plays a little bit differently. When an order is completed, you can choose when to turn it in, which will not only give you a point of favor and reduce impatience, but reward you for your efforts. Sometimes these rewards can be things like passive traits for the settlement or settlers. The second way to earn favor and lower impatience is through Glade Events, mentioned earlier. In general, most Glade Events will have multiple options for completion. One option typically rewards you with loot, while the other option usually favors the queen. The final way to gain favor is through reputation with your citizens. I know I mentioned earlier that I'd talk about the different races a bit, so I guess this is a good place to do that. I won't go into extreme detail about the individual races, but we'll say that every single race has its own bonuses and needs. For example, beavers love to work as tree cutters and will get a bonus to production if doing so. Foxes love working with rain and will become happier doing so, and so on. As you provide the specialized needs for a race, their resolve rises. If you can get their resolve into the blue levels, you'll start earning reputation or favor per minute. On the flip side of this, however, treat a race poorly or don't provide them with the basics, and they can start abandoning you or dying. This leads me to another one of the roguelike RNG portions of the game. As you earn favor, you're going to hit breakpoints shown as little dots on the bottom left bar. Each time you hit one of these, the game will roll some random blueprints for you to choose between. This system ensures that you'll never have all the same buildings from settlement to settlement. What you choose in this menu is paramount to your strategy for victory. Using what you've discovered on the map so far through exploring glades as well as information on your settlers' needs will help dictate what you should choose in this menu for each of your playthroughs. Through meta progression, which again I'll show towards the end of this, you'll be able to unlock more rerolls and even more building options and so on. Another important game mechanic that uses the roguelike RNG system is Cornerstones. After each storm cycle of a settlement, you'll be offered a choice of Cornerstones. These are basically persistent perks for the specific settlement, can have a huge impact on how you progress. These can be things like less hostility from cutting wood, to colonist move speed, extra trading routes, more production, and the list goes on and on and on. Since I mentioned the storm cycle, let's talk about that a little bit. It's a very important part of the game, and then we're going to talk about hostility. And against the storm, the rain itself is the antagonist. It's always raining. This isn't just ordinary rain though. It carries a magic charge with it that you can try to harness. Although it's always raining, it's not always storming. Each settlement will go through cycles of rain, starting with the drizzle, which evolves into the clearance, which despite its name is still a rainy season, and eventually culminating in the storm. Some of the cornerstones and other things I mentioned earlier are only active during certain seasons as well. The main thing I want to focus on here though is the storm season. The storm season is destructive and where most of your losses will come. Depending on your difficulty and hostility level, there can be many negative effects or mutators during this period. These can range from huge resolve hits, citizens eating twice as much, gold disappearing, failing production cycles, even to settlers' deaths. During the storm, the forest hostility is at its max as well, and your people's resolve is going to suffer. So let's talk about hostility a bit. Hostility is another very important system in Against the Storm. Hostility is shown as this red half circle at the top center of the screen, right around where the seasons and such are shown. If you hover over this, it'll tell you everything that is currently impacting your hostility. Every time you fill this hostility bar, you gain a hostility level. Not only will this make your settlers less happy, it can activate some of those negative modifiers we were talking about previously. There are lots of things that can impact hostility in both a positive or negative way. Some of these will be the same every settlement, such as wood cutting, the number of glades you've opened, and even the number of years your settlement has been around for. Others will vary due to cornerstones, buildings, and many more factors. Since we've talked about rain a bit, I wanted to touch on yet another important mechanic of the game. Eventually, through meta progression, you're going to open up various game mechanics such as traders, trade routes, and rain punk. Yes, rain punk. As I mentioned before, it's always raining, and the rain is magical. You will eventually learn how to capture and harness the rain to make machines and add-ons for your settlement. These can be incredibly strong. Most will either give you a huge production boost to a building or vastly increase the worker's resolve. Some recipes just straight up take rainwater. However, depending on your difficulty, the rain will also corrupt. This corruption will cause Blightrot, which you'll have to dedicate specialized buildings, workers, and resources to fight. Like with most things in Against the Storm, balancing how much you use this system can be a key to victory. After each settlement, you're going to earn rewards. You earn some rewards even if you fail though, so no matter what, you'll continue to progress. If your settlement was successful, you'll see it as its own self-sustained town on the world map once you return. In new settlements, you'll be able to trade with this one, and it'll also be kind of a launching point to get further away from the smoldering city. Speaking of, you can use this time between settlements to go to the smoldering city itself and use your earned currency on meta progression, in which there's a ton of stuff to unlock. In addition, there are areas of lore, collectibles, and so on. You will also notice that the large bar at the bottom has started to progress. As I mentioned briefly before, when this is full, the cycle will end and all but the smoldering city will be wiped out or reset. So what's the goal if all that was for nothing and it gets wiped? Well, your main goal is to reach and secure seals. Each seal will allow for more and more time between cycles, making it so you can get further and further locations. The seals can be very difficult, punishing missions depending on your difficulty. And that's basically it. That is the gameplay loop for Against the Storm. As I've said many times, it is a deceptively complex game about making the most out of random choices that get thrown at you. I really enjoy the fact the game can be a mostly chill base builder game on the settler or pioneer difficulties, or a difficult, almost puzzle-like game at the other end of that spectrum. If you are like me and enjoy the gameplay loop of Against the Storm, you can get hundreds of hours out of this for sure. I know this video didn't go over every single system and nuance of the game, but I wanted to keep this from getting too crazy long. I feel like this is definitely enough information for you to make an informed decision on how you'd feel about the game. I very much enjoy it, and I'll be returning to the game on and off for the foreseeable future. If you want to see more Against the Storm content from me, let me know in the comments or Discord or wherever's easiest for you to contact. If you enjoyed this Against the Storm video or it helped you out at all, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and leaving a comment down below, and maybe sharing it with others. Also, be sure to stop by my live stream. I'm now dual streaming on both YouTube and Twitch. On Twitch, Adam vs. Everything, and here on YouTube, just click the live tab in my YouTube channel profile. And as always, thank you for watching.